The words hit me like a freight train to the chest. "You're done here, Clifford." Jeffrey Winslow's voice carried that particular brand of cruelty only privileged men seem to master, smooth as silk, cold as January. His custom-tailored Brioni suit probably cost more than I'd spent on rent all year, and he wore it like armor as he delivered what he clearly considered a justified execution. Behind him, the executive conference room felt less like a workplace and more like a Roman Colosseum, and I was the entertainment. 8 years. 8 years of sacrifice, of midnight code sessions, of building their digital empire while Jeffrey played golf and collected titles he hadn't earned. All of it ending because I'd missed his society wedding to finish the most important project of my career. I walked out carrying a cardboard box and my dignity, completely unaware that this termination would become the biggest mistake of Jeffrey Winslow's privileged life. Just 72 hours earlier, I'd been deep in my home office at 3 a.m, riding a caffeine high that would probably require medical intervention eventually. My fingers flew across the keyboard, writing the final lines of code for what I'd started calling Project Sentinel, a quantum encryption system worth an estimated $2.3 billion in licensing revenue. This wasn't just another security patch. This was revolutionary technology that would make current cyber defenses look like padlocks on bank vaults. The wedding invitation had been sitting on my desk for 2 weeks, its expensive cardstock and gold foil practically screaming old money. "The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Jeffrey Winslow and Sienna Ashford." I'd stared at it more times than I could count, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. I'm Clifford Maynard, and for 8 years I'd been Winslow Technologies' lead encryption architect, the guy they called in when impossible problems needed solving, when government contracts required someone who actually understood the technology they were selling. While Jeffrey Winslow collected executive titles like trading cards, I built the systems that kept their billion-dollar empire from collapsing under its own incompetence. Every weekend, I'd sacrificed. Every relationship that had crumbled because I was married to my work, every family dinner I'd missed, all of it had led to this moment, creating something that would change cybersecurity forever. Jeffrey Winslow, meanwhile, was a case study in nepotism. Born into wealth, educated at Princeton because his family had donated a building, handed a vice presidency at 26 with a resume that would have gotten anyone else laughed out of the building. He had charisma when it suited him and ruthlessness when it didn't, operating under the eternal delusion that being born rich meant he'd earned everything he had. My phone vibrated, pulling me back to the present. A text from my brother. "Dad's asking about Sunday brunch. Says it's been 3 months since he's seen you." The familiar guilt settled into my chest like an old friend. 3 months. Had it really been that long? I typed back quickly, "This weekend, I promise. Just finishing something big." Another message popped up, this one from my colleague David in engineering. "Jeffrey's keeping a list of who's attending the wedding. Word is he's taking attendance like it's elementary school." I frowned at the screen. Taking attendance? At a wedding? Before I could respond, another message arrived. Someone heard him joke about separating the loyal employees from the dead weight. Probably just wedding jitters, but thought you should know. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. The wedding started at 10. I could still make it. Shower. Suit up. Show my face for an hour. Play the political game I'd always been terrible at playing. But Project Sentinel was so close to completion, and the board presentation was Monday morning. Everything in me screamed to keep working, to finish what I'd started. I made my choice. I chose excellence over politics. By Monday morning, I'd learn exactly how much that decision would cost me. The conference room felt like walking into a freezer. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that suddenly felt hostile. Jeffrey stood at the head of the mahogany table, his new wedding ring catching the light like a warning. Behind him sat his father, CEO Shane Winslow, arms crossed, face unreadable. He hadn't said a word. "Clifford," Jeffrey said, my name sounding like something unpleasant he'd found on his shoe. "Thanks for making time on such short notice." I stood there, hands clasped behind my back, waiting. 8 years had taught me when to speak and when to let silence do the heavy lifting. Jeffrey adjusted his platinum cufflinks with deliberate slowness. Effective immediately, Your employment with Winslow Technologies is terminated. The room tilted slightly, but I kept my expression neutral. Terminated. My mind raced through possibilities, budget cuts, restructuring, some critical error I'd missed. But Jeffrey's next words cut through every rational explanation like a knife through silk. You demonstrated a fundamental lack of loyalty to this organization, he continued, each word precisely chosen for maximum impact. Missing my wedding? That's not the kind of team player we need here. We value people who understand what truly matters. Loyalty. I'd given this company 8 years of my life, built systems that protected billions in assets, sacrificed everything for code that made their empire possible, and now I was being erased by someone whose greatest accomplishment was being born to the right family. I swallowed the fire rising in my throat. One outburst, one moment of weakness, and I'd lose any leverage I might have. So I smiled slightly, even as panic coiled in my gut. My father's medical bills from his heart surgery last year were still mounting. The experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover had drained my savings to almost nothing. Without my salary, without the health benefits, every doctor's visit would push him closer to financial ruin. Jeffrey must have seen something flicker in my eyes, because his smirk deepened. He leaned forward, both palms flat on the polished table. "Never," he said softly, "mistake your usefulness for importance. Family comes first, Clifford. Always has, always will. It wasn't about business. It was about hierarchy, about bloodlines, about invisible walls that would always separate people like me from people like him." I gathered what remained of my dignity and walked toward the door. My footsteps echoed against marble like a countdown timer. As I reached the threshold, one thought crystallized with absolute clarity. You just made the biggest mistake of your entitled life, Jeffrey, and you have no idea yet. The cardboard box on my desk looked pathetic. 8 years of excellence reduced to personal items that barely filled the container. Around me, the engineering floor hummed with forced normalcy, keyboards clicking, hushed conversations, but every pair of eyes carefully avoided mine. Apparently, loyalty evaporates the moment you're no longer useful. My computer screen displayed a stark message, access revoked. Contact it for equipment return. 8 years of code, innovation, breakthrough moments that had felt like pure magic, all of it locked behind corporate walls. The irony almost made me laugh. They'd just fired the only person who truly understood how their most valuable asset actually worked. I was sealing the box when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Building exit. 2 minutes. Black car. We need to talk. Evelyn. Evelyn. Former Chief Innovation Officer. The woman who'd mentored me through my first 3 years before she'd mysteriously retired 2 years ago. No announcement. No farewell party. Just gone. Rumors had swirled about a clash with the Winslow family, but Evelyn had vanished before anyone could get the real story. If Evelyn was reaching out now, after 2 years of complete silence, it meant something significant was about to happen. I carried my box to the elevator, ignoring the whispered conversations that died as I passed. The doors closed with a soft chime, sealing away the life I'd built. But as the floors counted down, something shifted inside me. The numbness began cracking, revealing something harder underneath. Not anger, not yet. Determination. The black sedan sat at the curb like a promise. Through tinted windows, I could make out Evelyn's silhouette, silver hair in her signature twist, dark suit that commanded respect, eyes that cataloged everything. She nodded toward the empty seat. "Get in, Clifford. We have much to discuss." The car pulled away from Winslow Technologies' gleaming tower, and I watched 8 years of my life shrink in the side mirror. Evelyn handed me a bottle of water and a knowing smile. Jeffrey always was an arrogant prince, but he just made a mistake that's going to cost his family everything. I stared at her, waiting. Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The label made my breath stop. Project Sentinel, Intellectual Property Documentation. Before I left Winslow Technologies, Evelyn said carefully I put certain protections in place. "Specifically for you." "What kind of protections?" Her smile could have cut glass. "The kind that means Jeffrey Winslow just fired the legal owner of a $2.3 billion encryption system, The folder felt electric in my hands. Inside were patent applications, filing receipts, and a document that made the world tilt, a technology transfer agreement signed 2 years ago, assigning all rights to my quantum encryption work to a shell company called Maynard Innovations LLC. My signature was at the bottom, along with a date I remembered, the night Evelyn had asked me to review routine IP paperwork after hours. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You do," Evelyn said firmly. "You're just afraid to believe it. That encryption system they think they own, it legally belongs to you. Every patent, every line of code, every innovation, all protected under an LLC you've owned for 2 years. The city blurred past as the magnitude hit me. Jeffrey hadn't just fired an employee, he'd fired the owner of the company's most valuable asset, and he had absolutely no idea. Evelyn leaned back, satisfaction radiating from her. I warned Shane about his son's management style, told him that arrogance without substance would destroy everything they'd built. He chose family over wisdom. She turned to me. Now we watched the consequences unfold. My phone was already buzzing, colleagues reaching out in shock, LinkedIn messages, industry contacts asking what happened. But none of that mattered now. I had something better than sympathy. I had leverage. The cafe was quiet except for the hiss of espresso machines and low conversations. I sat across from Evelyn, the Maynard Innovations folder spread between us like a battle plan. "Walk me through this," I said, my voice steadier now. Every detail. Evelyn pulled out her laptop. 2 years ago, I saw the writing on the wall. Jeffrey was being groomed for more authority, and his management philosophy was becoming crystal clear. Politics over performance, loyalty over competence. I knew talented people would become casualties. She turned the screen toward me, showing a complex corporate structure. Maynard Innovations LLC was incorporated in Delaware. Completely legal, completely airtight. The technology transfer agreement you signed moved all intellectual property rights from future projects to the LLC. Since Project Sentinel was developed after the signing date, it belongs to Maynard Innovations. It belongs to you. I studied the documents with my cryptographer's mind, analyzing every clause. But I was employed by Winslow Technologies. Don't they have claims? Normally, yes. But their employment contracts have a carve-out for pre-existing IP frameworks. The LLC framework pre-existed your current contract, and technically, all quantum encryption work was developed under the LLC's umbrella. Evelyn's smile turned predatory. Shane Winslow's lawyers wrote the very loophole that's about to destroy them. My phone lit up with another call from Winslow Technologies. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. "They're realizing something's wrong," Evelyn observed. I opened my secure email and found what I expected. The licensing documentation for Project Sentinel. Every piece of code, every patent application, every breakthrough was registered under Maynard Innovations. Winslow Technologies had been using technology they didn't own. "What's the value assessment?" I asked. Evelyn pulled up another document. Conservative estimate, $2.3 billion in licensing potential over 5 years. The algorithm doesn't just encrypt data, it creates a virtually unhackable communication infrastructure. Every government agency, every major corporation, every financial institution will need this technology. The number hit like lightning, $2.3 billion. More money than I could comprehend. But this wasn't about money. It was about principle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Shane Winslow. We need to talk immediately." I showed Evelyn, who chuckled. "Let them sweat. Desperation isn't a good negotiating position." I powered down the phone. For 8 years, I'd answered every call, every email, sacrificed every moment of personal time for their success. Today, they could wait. "What's our next move?" I asked. Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "We let them panic. Then we negotiate from strength." The Winslow Technologies building looked different from the outside now, less imposing. Somehow, now that I knew the secret eating away at its foundation, I sat in another black sedan, watching executives hurry in and out like ants from a disturbed colony. Evelyn sat beside me, scrolling through messages. The board called an emergency session. Apparently, the quantum encryption system is throwing critical errors. They can't deploy, can't update, can't access core functionality. I wasn't surprised. I'd built safeguards into the code, not sabotage, but protection against unauthorized modifications. Every major function required my digital signature to execute. Jeffrey had fired the only person who could make his most valuable asset actually work. How long before they figure it out? I asked. They already know they need you. They don't know they can't have you. Evelyn's smile was sharp. The system will degrade without proper maintenance. Every day they wait is another day the code becomes unstable. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Calls from it, from the CTO, from executives I barely knew. The desperation was palpable. But I'd learned something about power. Sometimes the strongest position is silence. A familiar figure emerged from the building's entrance. Jeffrey Winslow, but not the confident prince from this morning. His tie was loosened, hair disheveled, and even from this distance I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was talking rapidly into his phone, gesturing with barely controlled panic. Buyer's remorse, Evelyn observed. Jeffrey disappeared into a waiting car, probably heading to another crisis meeting. 12 hours ago, he'd held my career in his hands. Now I held his company's future in mine. The irony, I said quietly, is that I would have stayed. Even after missing the wedding, even after the humiliation, I would have stayed and maintained the system. I loved that code. Evelyn studied me. And now? I watched Jeffrey's car disappear into traffic. Now he's about to learn the difference between being feared and being respected. The war room looked like a disaster zone. Coffee cups everywhere, papers scattered across surfaces, and the normally pristine Winslow boardroom reeking of desperation and cold pizza. Jeffrey sat at the head of the table, his wedding ring catching light as he drummed his fingers against mahogany with increasing agitation. "Tell me again," he said, voice tight with fury, "how our most valuable asset is completely locked down." The chief technology officer, Dr. Patterson, wiped sweat from his forehead. Every attempt to access core functions triggers the same response: authorization required. Contact system administrator. But Clifford Maynard was the system administrator, and his access was revoked this morning. Then reactivated, Jeffrey snapped. "We can't. The system has multiple encryption layers. Even with administrative privileges, we can't override the security protocols he built." Dr. Patterson's voice cracked. "Sir, he didn't just write the code, he designed it to be tamper-proof." Shane Winslow, who'd remained silent, finally spoke. "How bad is it?" Patterson swallowed hard. "Without access to the core algorithm, we can't fulfill major contracts. The Department of Defense renewal is next week. The European Commission deal is pending certification. If we can't demonstrate system functionality," he didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. Hundreds of millions in contracted revenue, all dependent on technology they couldn't access. Jeffrey's phone buzzed. His face went pale. "The DoD is asking for a system demonstration tomorrow morning. They're concerned about rumors of instability." "What rumors?" Shane asked sharply. "Industry chatter. Someone leaked that we terminated our lead architect." Jeffrey's voice was rising. "They're questioning our ability to maintain the system." The general counsel cleared her throat. "There's another issue. I've been reviewing Clifford Maynard's employment agreements. There are complications." The room went silent, except for the air conditioning hum. "What kind of complications?" Shane asked. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. "Intellectual property assignments. There are carve-out clauses that might affect our ownership claims." Jeffrey grabbed the folder, scanning the legal language with mounting alarm. Pre-existing frameworks. Independent development. Technology transfer agreements. "Are you saying," Jeffrey asked slowly, "we might not own the algorithm?" "I'm saying we need to determine our exact IP rights before making public statements about system capabilities." Shane stood abruptly, his chair scraping against marble. 50 years building his empire, and his son had just threatened it all with a decision based on wounded pride. "Get Clifford Maynard on the phone," he commanded. "Now." Jeffrey's mouth opened to protest, but his father's glare silenced him. When they tried calling, my phone went straight to voicemail, and in a hotel suite across town, I was planning the next phase of a game Jeffrey didn't know he was losing. The Grandview Hotel suite overlooked the city like a command post. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Winslow Technologies' tower, its lights twinkling like stars on a sinking ship. I stood at the glass, coffee warming my hands, watching the building where my former life had ended this morning. Evelyn was at the dining table with her laptop, orchestrating what she called strategic communications, press releases, industry contacts, carefully placed leaks to financial journalists. "The Wall Street Journal wants a statement," she said. "They're running a story about Winslow Technologies' quantum encryption troubles. Someone leaked that their lead architect is gone." I smiled slightly. What kind of someone? The kind with insider knowledge and excellent reasons to want Jeffrey Winslow's mistakes exposed. Her fingers never stop moving. Market speculation is already starting. Stock price dropped 8% in after-hours trading. My phone sat silent on the counter. 19 missed calls, 14 voicemails, and increasingly desperate texts from numbers I recognized and some I didn't. The latest from Shane Winslow himself. "Clifford, please. Whatever Jeffrey did, we can fix it. Name your price. Name my price." As if this was about money. As if 8 years of dedication could be repaired with a bonus and an apology. "They still don't understand," I said. "Understand what?" "That this was never about the wedding. It was about respect." I turned from the window. Jeffrey fired me because he could. Because in his world, competence serves privilege. And when privilege is questioned, competence gets eliminated. Evelyn closed her laptop. And now? Now he experiences consequences. Room service arrived. Salmon, asparagus, wine that probably cost more than my old monthly grocery budget. We ate in comfortable silence while the city hummed below. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. A number I recognized. David from engineering. "Clifford, I probably shouldn't call, but the place is going insane. They're offering $50,000 to anyone who can crack your encryption protocols." I put it on speaker. "That's generous. It gets better. Jeffrey's been calling everyone who ever worked with you, trying to find someone who understands your architecture. He even called your old professors. The man is panicking." After hanging up, Evelyn raised her wine glass. To panic, the great equalizer between inherited wealth and earned expertise. I clinked my glass against hers. The wine tasted like victory, complex and satisfying. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Tonight, I allowed myself to enjoy watching Jeffrey Winslow's empire develop its first cracks. They came like supplicants, but the throne was a conference table at the Four Seasons, and the supplicants wore custom suits. Shane Winslow led them, his normally perfect posture slightly bent under desperation's weight. Jeffrey followed, his wedding glow replaced by the gray pallor of someone who'd bet everything and lost. I sat across from them, Evelyn to my right, our lawyer to my left. The Maynard Innovations paperwork was arranged in neat stacks: patents, ownership documents, licensing agreements, a paper fortress that had taken years to build. "Clifford," Shane began, voice carefully controlled, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond immediately. Let him fill the silence with discomfort. 8 years of jumping when they called, of answering midnight emails, of sacrificing my personal life for their quarterly reports. That had ended yesterday morning when Jeffrey delivered my termination like a royal decree. "A misunderstanding," I repeated finally. "Is that what we're calling it?" Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably. "Look, the wedding thing, maybe I overreacted, but you have to understand. It was important to my family. Important enough to fire your lead cryptographer 12 hours before a major deployment?" It wasn't a question. Shane cleared his throat. "What Jeffrey means is that we value loyalty at Winslow Technologies, but we also value talent, and your talent is irreplaceable." Irreplaceable. 24 hours ago, Jeffrey had made me very replaceable. Our lawyer interjected smoothly. "I've reviewed the termination. It appears to be without cause, which triggers certain intellectual property provisions." Shane's face went pale. "What provisions?" Evelyn slid a document across the polished table. "Technology Transfer Agreement. Maynard Innovations, LLC." Shane picked it up with unsteady hands. "This can't be legal," Jeffrey said, voice cracking. "He was our employee. Work for hire. We own everything he created." Actually, you don't, our lawyer replied calmly. Mr. Maynard's employment agreement includes carve-out language for pre-existing IP frameworks. The LLC was established before his current contract, and all quantum encryption work was developed under the LLC's auspices. I watched Shane read the document. 50 years of business experience, watching his empire's most valuable assets slip away because his son couldn't tolerate being crossed. This is extortion, Jeffrey said. This is business, Evelyn corrected. Something your family should understand. The silence stretched until even I felt uncomfortable. Then Shane Winslow did something I'd never seen in 8 years. He asked instead of demanded. What do you want, Clifford? The question hit differently than expected. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because someone was finally asking what I wanted instead of telling me what I should do. I leaned forward. I want what I've always wanted, Mr. Winslow. Respect for the work. Recognition for the contribution. Security that comes from being valued for more than my willingness to be invisible. We can give you that, Shane said quickly. Chief Technology Officer. Your own division, whatever title you want. Under Jeffrey's supervision? The silence answered. Family came first at Winslow Technologies, always had, always would. Jeffrey could fire their most valuable employee on a whim, and Shane would spend millions cleaning up the mess rather than hold his son accountable. I have a counteroffer. I reached for the folder Evelyn had prepared. Winslow Technologies can license the quantum encryption technology from Maynard Innovations. 5-year agreement, renewable at our discretion. Standard industry rates. I slid the licensing agreement across the table. Jeffrey grabbed it first. I watched his face go white. $400 million, he whispered. For $2.3 billion worth of technology, I corrected. You're getting a discount for being early adopters. Shane stared at the contract. Clifford, be reasonable. You built this while working for us, using our resources. Using my expertise, I interrupted, voice calm but edged. My late nights. My sacrificed weekends. My innovations. The resources you provided were a computer and internet connection. Everything else came from me. Jeffrey suddenly stood, chair scraping marble. This is insane. You can't hold our entire company hostage because your feelings got hurt. The room went silent. Evelyn's eyebrows raised. Our lawyer made a note. Shane looked like he wanted to disappear. Hurt feelings? I repeated softly. I stood as well, hands flat on the table. Jeffrey, you fired me because I missed your wedding. Not because I did bad work. Not because I violated policy. Not because I wasn't loyal to this company. You fired me because your ego couldn't handle someone prioritizing professional responsibilities over your personal celebration. My voice grew stronger. You reduced 8 years of excellence to 1 moment of perceived disrespect. You threw away the person who built your most valuable asset because I didn't clap pretty enough at your party. Jeffrey opened his mouth, but I wasn't finished. So no, this isn't about hurt feelings. This is about consequences. You made a decision based on privilege and entitlement. Now you live with the results. The same way I had to live with being disposable in your world. I sat back down, heart pounding, voice steady. The licensing offer is fair market value. Take it or leave it. But understand, I'm not your employee anymore. I'm not someone you can fire when I inconvenience you. I'm your business partner now. And business partners negotiate as equals. Shane stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. We'll need time to review the terms, he said finally. Of course, you have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires, and Maynard Innovations will be free to license the technology to your competitors. I gathered my papers with the same calm efficiency I'd used clearing out my desk, but this time I wasn't leaving empty-handed. As we prepared to leave, Jeffrey called after me. Clifford. Wait. I turned back, curious despite myself. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for the wedding thing, for firing you, for all of it. The apology hung between us. For a moment I saw past the privilege to something almost human. Almost. I appreciate that, Jeffrey. But some things can't be unsaid. Some bridges can't be unburned. You taught me that yesterday morning. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won that game was far from over, but because, for the first time, I'd spoken my truth without fear. The consequences had already landed. Now I was free to build something new. The news broke at 6 a.m. Winslow Technologies loses control of quantum encryption technology. By market open, their stock was in freefall. From my hotel suite, coffee in hand, I watched headlines scroll across my laptop. Evelyn scrolled through a flood of emails, reporters, investors, analysts, all chasing the story. Dow Jones calls it one of the most expensive firings in corporate history, she said. Forbes estimates $2.8 billion in lost market value overnight. Staggering numbers, but what stuck with me was the narrative, a cautionary tale about leadership, loyalty, and mistaking fear for respect. My phone buzzed. David, all hands meeting. Damage control. Jeffrey looks like he hasn't slept in days. I could picture it, the same room where they'd fired me, now swarming with panic. At 9 a.m., Shane called. We'll take the licensing deal. All terms. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt sad. The inevitable end of a game that never needed to be played. Shane, I said, using his first name for the first time, why didn't you teach your son that people aren't disposable? Silence. Then, quietly, I failed him. And I failed you. I gave him power without responsibility. Thought blood was enough to build a legacy. His voice cracked. 50 years building this company, and I'm watching him destroy it in 50 hours. It doesn't have to be destroyed, I said gently. But it has to change. I proposed a condition. Jeffrey steps back from operational authority. No more unilateral firings. Decisions based on performance, not ego. That would be humiliating for him. More humiliating than losing $2 billion because someone missed your wedding? After a long pause, I'll discuss it with the board. Evelyn watched me after I hung up. You don't owe them anything. You could let them burn. I could. I agreed. But that would make me just like Jeffrey, choosing satisfaction over the greater good. That afternoon, my suite filled with offers, reporters, headhunters, VCs. The invisible cryptographer was suddenly Silicon Valley's hottest name. Then came Dr. Chen from Stanford, a proposal to deploy quantum encryption to protect hospitals, power grids, and transit systems, organizations that couldn't afford to be hacked or cutting-edge security. About $50 million less over 5 years, she admitted, but stronger patent protection, deeper impact, and a legacy built on protecting people, not profit margins. I thought of my father recovering in a hospital with outdated security, of cities vulnerable to cyber attacks, of the difference between being rich and being proud of your work. Jeffrey taught me something valuable, I told Evelyn. Power without purpose is just destruction waiting to happen. My phone buzzed again, emergency meeting. Leadership changes. Jeffrey just stormed out like he'd seen a ghost. Minutes later, Shane confirmed it, board approved all terms. Jeffrey's moved to business development. Operational decisions now require committee approval. Thank you for the guardrails. Evelyn whistled. He just got demoted in his own family's company. Fair? Maybe not. But justice rarely is. Then came Dr. Chen's final message. Pentagon approved the grant, $200 million over 3 years. Are you in? I looked out at the city skyline, thinking about all the invisible systems keeping 8 million people safe. Power plants, water facilities, emergency networks, most still running on obsolete security. Evelyn, I said, how do you feel about doing work that actually matters? She glanced up from her laptop. As opposed to making rich people richer? I want to take the Stanford deal. That's a lot of money to walk away from. That's a lot of people to protect. I paced to the window. Jeffrey taught me something about power. Having it isn't the same as deserving it. I don't want to become what I fought against. Evelyn closed her laptop. You realize this means walking away from the revenge fantasy. Jeffrey gets off easy. Good, I said, meaning it. Destroying him wouldn't prove I was better. Building something that protects people, that proves it. My phone rang. An unknown number. But the voice was unmistakably Jeffrey's. He sounded exhausted. Clifford, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call. I'm listening. The board restructured my role. I won't be making personnel decisions anymore. They called it preventing future incidents. Like firing you was an incident instead of a decision. I let the silence hang. I keep thinking about what you said, about treating people like they're disposable, and I realized that's exactly what I did. Not just to you, to a lot of people. I thought being the boss's son meant I could act on how I felt, not what was right. And now? I asked quietly. Now I'm learning the difference between having authority and earning respect. It's harder than I expected. There was real regret in his voice, the kind that comes with consequence. Jeffrey, I said, the real tragedy? I would have forgiven you for missing the wedding if you just treated me like a valued employee who made a mistake, not an enemy to eliminate. I would have apologized and done better. I know, he said after a long pause. That's what makes it worse. I destroyed something fixable because I cared more about proving I had power than using it wisely. After we hung up, I felt an unexpected lightness, not from his apology, but from his acknowledgement. Not just of lost revenue, but of human cost. The next morning, I signed 3 documents. First, the $400 million licensing deal with Winslow Technologies. Second, a $200 million partnership with Stanford to protect critical infrastructure. Third, a $10 million donation to upgrade security at the hospital where my father had his surgery. Evelyn raised her champagne glass. To Maynard Innovations. To quantum security. To proving the best revenge is living well. I clinked mine gently against hers. To proving the best revenge is living purposefully. 3 months later, I testified before a Senate subcommittee on cybersecurity and saw him in the gallery. Jeffrey, taking notes like a junior staffer, not a corporate heir. Our eyes met. He nodded, no smirk, just quiet respect. Afterward, he approached in the hallway. Congratulations. The work you're doing with hospitals and power grids, it's impressive. I shook his hand. No power play, just equals. What brings you to DC? I asked. Research. I'm drafting a proposal for Winslow to sponsor cybersecurity education in underserved communities. Trying to build something instead of just inheriting it. The arrogance was gone. In its place, humility. That sounds like important work, I said. I had a good teacher, he replied. Someone who showed me the difference between having power and deserving it. We parted in that marble corridor. 2 people reshaped by consequence. The algorithm I'd coded at 3 a.m. Now protected hospitals in Detroit, power plants in Texas, water systems across the Midwest. My name was on patents, testimonies, partnerships, but the signature I was proudest of was on a photo in my office. My father, healthy and smiling, in front of the hospital now shielded by code I wrote to matter. I walked into that boardroom thinking I'd lost everything, but sometimes losing what you thought defined you is the only way to discover what you're truly capable of building. Jeffrey taught me that power without wisdom is destruction waiting to happen. But he also taught me this: the strongest position isn't always attack. Sometimes it's patience, letting consequences deliver the lesson you can't. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, your value is never determined by those who fail to see it. You are not disposable. You are not replaceable. When someone tries to erase you, that's your invitation to write your own chapter. The difference between being fired and being freed is what you choose to build from the ashes. Jeffrey thought he was teaching me about loyalty. Instead, he taught me about leverage. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Build something that matters. Protect what needs protecting. Choose purpose over profit. Meaning over money, legacy over revenge. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can do is prove they didn't just lose an employee. They lost the future. If this story resonated, if you've ever been underestimated or cast aside, drop a comment. Hit subscribe if you believe competence should beat connections. Share this with someone who needs to hear your biggest setback might be your greatest setup. Because trust me, we're just getting started. And the next story might change how you think about power forever.